searching history for buried classics. This is Lost Treasures of Gaming.
Alright, what's up guys, and welcome to Gaming History 101 and OMG Nexus's Lost Treasures of Gaming. Now what this is this is a collaboration that we here at Gaming History 101 and Lost Treasures of Gaming have decided to do together. Now Lost Treasures of Gaming, if you don't know it, you can go find it on any stream you like, or of course the feed location is found at omgnexus.com. They interview classic game makers and the games that they make and talk about them. And I've become quite fascinated with the show. And I have worked with Zion Tane there, Sean, and he and I have talked, and we decided that it would be great for me to stream the games that they talk about after the show. So every show goes live on Monday, and starting at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time every Friday night, the beginning of Retro Game Night will be a clean show, no swearing, no nothing like that, of the week's Lost Treasure of Gaming. And this week there's none other than Mark Vittek's U-Boat. Now, we will be getting to U-Boat in just a second, but I wanted to show this off. Now, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, we have a wonderful Commodore VIC-20 screen. Here you go. This is what it looks like. And it, as you can see, had 4K of memory, which was 3,583 bytes that you could use to make your games. Well, different people would make different games, basically in BASIC. I think there were some in machine language, but a lot of them early on were in BASIC. And Mark Vittek is one of them. And believe it or not, he was in an issue of Compute, which was a magazine you can find on archive.org. I will also, when the video goes over to YouTube, be putting that in the show notes where you can find it. And what he did was he would talk about why he, and in the interview he talks about his different games, but he talks about what this game is, and then of course in the following pages is the actual program itself. Now this is, if you're not familiar, this is how we basically used to do this way back in the 80s. This program was written in 1981, and I don't know when it was first published. I believe it was in 82, but the issue I got it from was issue 42, which is November 1983. Now, with this is a Commodore 64 port, and I do know that Mark Vittek only wrote initially the VIC-20 version. So anyway, that is the game itself. And what you would do is, for example, just in case people are not familiar with it, let me switch over to the VIC-20 main screen real quick so we can talk about this. But what you would basically do is, for example, if you wanted to write a program, you would write like, like 5. Well, hold on. Oh, I forgot my spaces. Let's see. Oh, I apologize. It's been a while since I printed this up, but you would basically switch back real quick. You would basically type out exactly what you see here, and for the most part it was you just type exactly what you see. Occasionally there would be things where it says like 3 down, which is you press the down arrow key 3 times, and things like that, but otherwise, I mean, that's basically what it was. And so, I know why things aren't working, because I mapped certain keys that are used on the keyboard to the joystick for U-Boat. Anyway, so that was how it would work, and you would type out the program. Now, I was going to, for a minute, write out the whole program and launch it and see, what that was like, but I didn't think that was going to go over very well, especially because if I make one mistake, and you kind of inevitably do make mistakes when you're putting in these programs, it would fail. Plus, because of the size of it, U-Boat actually required 2 programs. So you would basically have a tape deck set up there, and you would type in the first program, and you would choose save, and it would write it to the tape. Then you would restart the machine, you would write the second program, choose save, record it to the tape as well. Go back, play both, and it would basically load one and then load the other immediately. So that was how you would do it. So anyway, so that we don't have to do all that, I have set this up in this emulator so that we should be ready to go. And I do seem to have everything set up. So let's launch this and play a little bit of U-Boat. So here we go. I'm going to switch this to the main screen. It'll load it up, and there we go. So you control the boat floating around here. And depth charges are going to come from boats up above. And you want to try to avoid those while also taking out as many of these... Oh, see, and you get nailed. As many of these boats as you can. So I'm going to keep going with this. You'll find the game is very difficult. Now, in the interview, and I don't want to spoil much of that, they explain kind of how some of the more complicated things here were done. So a lot of the times there would be, to have things move around, they would use different tricks to navigate the screen, and you would have to program that in. Well, in this one, instead, what Mark Vittek did, and he uses this tactic in a lot of his programs, so it's kind of his spin as a developer, was to actually have the keystrokes of the cursor be the movement of the U-boat, as far as I understand it in, of the German U-boat, as far as I understand, according to the interview. That's pretty fascinating, and it does allow for quick movements, and you don't need to automatically, program in the movements aside from just having it be the regular movements of, as if it were text. So that's pretty cool. Essentially, if you want to know what the two programs did, the first one had the instructions on it, so it would teach you how to play if you didn't know how to play, and it would also load up the graphics. Then with those, without resetting, with those graphics set in place, it would run the actual program. So basically, the first program modifies the way the screen looks. It should just be that ready, kind of blinking cursor screen. So if we want to, we can move over here and you can see some pictures of me on the camera real quick while I'm playing this. But and again, if you've not played VIC-20 games, or if you're not familiar with games from 1981, Mark Vittek wrote this while he was still in high school. It may seem very basic to you. In fact, I don't even think there's really an end to the game because there's no real score that's being kept. You just don't want to die, and you want to see what you can do without dying, which may seem basic, but again, back in the 80s, you were basically playing Pong clones, and so at least this was something different for you to do, and I gotta tell you, it was quite fun. Games like this, Jumpman, Mark Vittek actually wrote another game that was called like Racer Foo or something like that. It was a racing game which had the exact same track. I guess that would be the only complaint. But again, they had 3K to work with, and they talk about it in the interview. But 3K, or sorry, not 3K, 4K, 3,500 bytes is basically the equivalent of not even your signature in an email. So it's quite an impressive showing, all things considered. So, but yeah, and like I said, U-Boat, you basically have four-way navigation with the joystick. You can adapt it to the keyboard. In fact, that compute program does actually have the way you would modify the program if you didn't want to use the joystick. And yeah, it's a very cool game. It's fun. Yeah, I'm gonna try to see in the next 5 minutes how many I can get. The depth charges and the Allied forces, shall we say, have been getting the best of me. But okay, so we got one down. Some of these move so fast. Your timing is critical on this, and you really don't have time to shoot a second one. So you got to get it right the first time. So, whoa, see? It's the best, yeah, sometimes. But for those that have played before, especially that grew up playing them, see, and when you look on the screen here, it tells you how many carriers and how many destroyers you hit. So you always try to go for the higher score. And, you can use these as barriers. Think of it as like almost Space Invaders. You can use the mines to kind of cover you up. And the trade-off with being, deeper and closer to the surface is clearly that, your torpedo has to travel a much greater distance if you're deeper. And the timing on this all is pretty precise. So I think that was a destroyer. That might have been a destroyer, and the other ones are carriers, but... it didn't get my my missile firing on time. There we go. There's timing. Woohoo! 3. I think that's 3. See, and it nailed me. So let's see. What do we have here? We got 3 carriers, no destroyers. So we'll try to beat that. But again, I highly recommend you go to the OMG Nexus website and or look up Lost Treasures of Gaming. I believe it's at Lost Treasures OG is the Twitter. And I had no problems looking that up in my podcast provider, looking up Lost Treasures of Gaming and finding it. They're on episode 3 right now, with episode 3 being U-Boat. And there were just some great stories, both about the development of this and... Mark Vittek has gone on to do many other things. He now works with actually an MMO that is very highly publicized for younger people. But again, I wouldn't know anything about MMOs myself. But that's what he's currently doing. And he's had an opportunity to work on lots of things, including Area 51 Black Site, which I thought was interesting. So he's kind of worked in gaming across the board, aside from a stint in software. So, but yeah, it was great to hear that, and to also hear the stories, which I think is specific to a lot of people who grew up in the 80s, myself included, which are the lovely stories of father and son playing on Commodores together. In my case, it was the 64. I'm a little bit younger than I believe the two gentlemen on OMG Nexus. Actually, I know their ages. I'm not going to exploit that, but yes, they are a little bit older than I am. So the VIC-20 may have been more the father-son thing for them. Okay, now when we get a palette change, we get to a certain score, which I think is interesting. I wonder if it might just be perception, but it feels like the boats are moving a little faster this time. The carriers especially. Yeah, I got the destroyer. Got him. Start to get your timing down really well. There we go. Don't come into my waters. No. Got close there. Ha-ha. Nope. Oof. But yeah, I could totally, my personal game with my father was Jumpman, but I could totally see this being a game we would have played together, especially because we're both kind of history buffs. And this has a lot of World War I backing. But anyway, 7 carriers, 4 destroyers. I think I'm going to have a hard time beating that. But anyway, it is Lost Treasures of Gaming. It's a fantastic show. And every week we will be playing what they are talking about on that show, and featuring it. So definitely go check out that wonderful interview, see what that's all about. Again, remember, it was Compute, November 1983. I believe it was episode 42, or issue 42. The specific U-boat program is on page 306, and that is at archive.org. I will have a link in the show notes. Yeah, so there's that. So thank you for tuning in. Definitely tell people about it. We are twitch.tv/GH101. We represent Gaming History 101, which is a podcast about retro gaming, about games of the past, things like that. And so this is definitely up my alley. I did want to point out that this Twitch channel, as you probably noticed, does feature some explicit content warnings. That is both because the games we play, as well as myself when I'm playing the more intense games, can get kind of heavy-handed in content. So keep that in mind if you're going to be a viewer. But I do promise that Lost Treasures of Gaming, I promise the OMG Nexus network, and it's not that big of a deal, to keep it a clean show. So at least from 11:30 until midnight Eastern Standard Time, we might not go as long as I'm noticing here. We're probably going to chime in right around the 20-minute mark, but different games might have more time with them, and I definitely could continue playing this. I've been getting to know it all week, and been getting kind of hooked to it. But anyway. But you can definitely check that out. Check out the podcast. It is fantastic. And come check us out at gaminghistory101.com. For those of you who are staying, the night is just starting. I don't know if there's going to be a whole lot of explicit content, but I'm playing a tougher game, so I might be swearing here and there. But we are going to move on to the NES in about 10 minutes at midnight Eastern Standard Time to be playing Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. That is a Tengen joint. It was an unlicensed game, and then it was later licensed in its exact form by a different company and officially released on the NES. So it's one of my favorites growing up. Maybe people have avoided it because it is a licensed game, but I actually have fun with this pseudo arcade port. So anyway, so I want to thank the OMG Nexus network and Lost Treasures of Gaming, and stay tuned. We will have more content coming up, and if you are here just for the Lost Treasures of Gaming, we will see you next week for whatever game is next. I actually don't know myself. I tune in and watch the episodes, listen to the episodes to find that out. So anyway, in the meantime, we will get everything set up and be back in about 10 minutes, but this is Fred Rojas with Gaming History 101 saying peace out. And I have worked with Zion Tane there, Sean, and he and I have talked, and we decided that it would be great for me to stream the games that they talk about after the show. So every show goes live on Monday, and starting at 11:30 Eastern Standard Time every Friday night, the beginning of Retro Game Night will be a clean show, no swearing, no nothing like that, of the week's Lost Treasure of Gaming. And this week, there's none other than Mark Vittek's U-Boat. Now, we will be getting to U-Boat in just a second, but I wanted to show this. Find on archive.org. I will also, when the video goes over to YouTube, be putting that in the show notes where you can find it. And what he did was he would talk about why he, and in the interview, he talks about his different games, but he talks about what this game is, and then of course in the following pages is the actual program itself. Now this is, if you're not familiar, this is how we basically used to do this way back in the 80s. This program was written in 1981, and I don't off. Now, as you can see in the upper right-hand corner, we have a wonderful Commodore VIC-20 screen. Here you go. This is what it looks like. And it, as you can see, had 4K of memory, which was 3,583 bytes that you could use to make your games. Well, different people would make different games, basically in BASIC. I think there were some in machine language, but a lot of them early on were in BASIC. And Mark Vittek is one of them. And believe it or not, he was in an issue of Compute, which was a magazine you can... Alright, what's up guys, and welcome to Gaming History 101 and OMG Nexus's Lost Treasures of Gaming. Now what this is a collaboration that we here at Gaming History 101 and Lost Treasures of Gaming have decided to do together. Now Lost Treasures of Gaming, if you don't know it, you can go find it on any stream you like, or of course the feed location is found at omgnexus.com. They interview classic game makers and the games that they make and talk about them. And I've become quite fascinated with the show.
searching history for buried classics. This is Lost Treasures of Gaming.